Today we are going to wander around Salem and see what it is like after Halloween, because I wanted to come before Halloween, but it was too busy because this place gets super crazy. But Salem has become like a hot spot here in Boston. I try to come every year because I love it here, but so we just parked. It's free because of Veterans Day, so parking was free.
Salem was founded in 1626 by Roger Conant and a group of immigrants from Cape Ann. They had a failing settlement there, so they decided to make their way over to Salem. The original name of Salem was Namkig. 2 years later, in 1628, John Endicott arrives in Salem with 50 new colonists. And at that point, they changed the name from Namkig to Salem. After Endicott arrived, he led the group of settlers to lay ground for thousands of Puritans to come over to the New World. The Puritans were a group of English Protestants who regarded the Reformation of the Church of England under Elizabeth as incomplete and sought to simplify and regulate forms of worship. They believed that it was important to work hard and control yourself, and that pleasure is wrong or unnecessary. This is Salem Harbor. It was once the site of a major international port for the colonies in Salem. All of the goods that came in through the harbor were also checked at the Salem's Custom House that was built in 1649, and it was responsible for collecting taxes.
This is the Salem Maritime National Historic Site. It was established in 1938 to preserve the wharves and historic buildings associated with Salem's contributions to the economic development of young America. The site was founded in 1626, and through the late 19th century, Salem looked to the sea for its livelihood. The city's peak years was between the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812, when Salem shipbuilders, merchants, and mariners opened new ports of trade for America in Asia and other parts of the world. The wealth created boosted the economy of the new nation and made Salem the 6th largest city in America in 1790.
So whenever I'm visiting somewhere that is very historic and very old, I mean, this is from the 1600s, I always just like to think of who were those first people and what was it like when they first arrived to a new country or new land. Anywhere in the world, it doesn't matter if it's here in the US or a different country. These people have been on the ship for months. They are carrying goods from all over the world, and then at this point in history, people had never seen or smelled a spice that was from India. So it was a really interesting part of history to be the one bringing in. Can you imagine like the noise and the vendors? If you go to a country now, and you go somewhere that has, like I was in Georgia, and they have tons of spices, and the spices are just like overwhelming, and you don't know what they do and what they're like, and it's just so interesting. I can't imagine being here then to see and hear what they thought about what was going on, and the noise and how fun it must have been when the ships actually came into port, and then of course to practice cooking with the new spices.
So all the goods that were needed in town were needed at the time came in through this port, and it says like a lot of like spices from India and like unique spices from all over the world that came here. It's interesting, there's a West India goods store right here. But my favorite part of Salem is that it's so historical and the founding of this country. It's so interesting, as well as the buildings are so cool. It's so like just interesting how it was founded and started, how it got famous. And unfortunately for the murdering of what they said was witches, but we know now probably were not. But now there is witch stuff everywhere, like witches' balls and tarot cards and magic and palm reading. So for me, someone who is into this stuff, it's really cool and interesting.
Salem is also known for for its period and federal architectures, as well as buildings in the style of Greek Revival, Queen Anne Gothic Revival, Victorian Goth, and Colonial Revival styles. The Greek Revival style is often called the first truly American style. As we were walking around Salem in the houses that I am showing you, they appear to be in the Greek Revival style. However, I am not an architect. This is what I researched online and I found it quite interesting. The House of Seven Gables was built in 1668 by John Turner, a wealthy merchant. Nathaniel Hawthorne stayed at this house and was the inspiration for his novel, The House of Seven Gables. The House of Seven Gables was a romance story, and it was also a Gothic novel that was written mid-1850 by Nathaniel Hawthorne. The book basically follows a New England family and their ancestral home. Hawthorne also explores the theme of his time, which was guilt, retribution, and atonement, and especially around the supernatural and witchcraft world. The book was inspired by The House of Seven Gables. Nathaniel Hawthorne has been described as one of the greatest American novelists of all time. He also wrote The Scarlet Letter. Nathaniel Hawthorne is also related to William Hawthorne. William Hawthorne was one of the first settlers of Salem. And you will notice that William Hawthorne does not have a W in his name, whereas Nathaniel Hawthorne does. Nathaniel Hawthorne added the W to his name to separate himself from his ancestors. Because William Hawthorne's son, Judge John Hawthorne, was the one who sentenced all the witches to their death. So Judge John Hawthorne, also a relative of Nathaniel Hawthorne, he is a symbol of that period where people believed that witches were real. There was no scientific explanation for the bizarre behavior that was being shown, so witchcraft seemed to be the only logical explanation that these people could come up with for these children, these kids, these teenage girls accusing locals in town of being witches. They would say someone just looked at me and threw me into a fit, or they looked at me and they cast a spell. There was no other reasoning. However, witchcraft was a felony, and Judge Hawthorne is the one who decided. He is best known for the witch trials, and he also became known as a hanging judge because he did sentence the witches to their death. So that is why you will notice that Nathaniel Hawthorne has a W in his name, and Judge Hawthorne and the settlers who were named Hawthorne do not spell their name the same way. However, they are related. And that's also why they say Nathaniel Hawthorne's books are about what happened during that time period and what he saw from his interpretation of what happened. And it sounds to me like he did not believe too much in the Puritan society. And as we know, that society is no longer here because it might have had a few flaws in its system. While in Salem, we also had to check out a candy store. So we got some good chocolates.
Okay, as with anything here, I feel like in the US, of course, we went into the witchy store and we all get something. I got this little ring and a gemstone, and then my niece got something similar. And then we went to a chocolate store and got some chocolate. Now we're gonna go have lunch because that's just what you do when you're exploring, especially when you have a child. They get hungry and like to look at things, but it is so cold. It's not like cold yet because it's not snowing in Boston. It's a lot colder, but we're right on the water, and yeah, it's definitely cold. But these little streets, oh my god. I always love how beautiful it is here. I would never live here, but it is just beautiful to come and see and explore. This is like a new way of showing you guys another city that maybe you have never been to. I've been here well, my family grew up around here. My grandparents, my sister lives here, so I've been coming to Salem for years, and it is crazy how big it has gotten. I'll try if we go over to the main little village and show you, but right now we're just in like the older part of town where we always came with little kids.
We went into this cute little pub. I think it was more of like a food beer place, but anyways, we went in, I got a Reuben. It was so good. And yeah, then we continued exploring. I was looking for the founder's statue, but I didn't find it because it started to get dark, as you're going to notice soon.
This land was once owned by Richard Moore, the only Mayflower passenger to move from Plymouth to Salem, right here. Okay, it is slowly getting colder, so we are leaving soon because we're freezing. So we're gonna go up into the Salem village, and there's like a memorial of the witch trials, but the witch trials were not actually held here. They were held outside of town. We're gonna try to go, but it's already getting dark, but we're gonna see if we can make it over there. But right now we're going to go to the memorial, basically the cemetery.
This is the oldest cemetery in Salem, and it was started in 1637. It is also known as the Charter Street Cemetery. There is a witch memorial around the cemetery to memorialize the witches that were hanged during the witch trials. They were not hung at this exact spot. They were hung outside of town at a place called Proctor's Ledge. However, the witches that were hanged are not buried in the cemetery because they were not permitted to be buried. What happened is their bodies were given to their families and they were buried in an undisclosed location. So don't know if anyone in Salem knows where that location is, but I would guess no, because it would have been a crime or a sin to even be related to someone who was hung for witchcraft. During the witch trials, over 200 people were accused and 30 were found guilty. 19 were executed by hanging, which included 14 women, 5 men, and 1 male. Giles Corey was crushed to death. Basically, Giles Corey was crushed to death because they were trying to get a confession out of him. At this point in history, if he were to confess to witchcraft by being pressed to death, he would have lost everything, because if you were accused of witchcraft, your entire family lost everything. The government would come in and take your property and seize everything. So your family would be left with nothing. So Giles Corey refused to say that he was a witch. Firstly, he probably wasn't a witch. None of them probably actually were witches in the way that they were being accused of witchcraft. But he also knew that so the crushing him was to get a confession that he was a witch, and then he would have been hung. So he would have been killed either way. So instead of confessing to die a quick death, he was crushed, but his family kept their land, because if he would have confessed, they would have lost everything. The other women and the men who were hanged, the government came and took everything that they owned. So their children and their families were left with nothing, essentially. During the trials, the courts relied on 3 types of evidence to determine if someone was a witch. Now, there were other ways to determine, like if someone sank and they drowned and died, they were a witch, or if they floated, they were a witch. But when they were actually in court, there was three things they looked for. First of all, a confession, of course. Secondly, was a testimony of 2 eyewitnesses to the acts of witchcraft. Third, evidence. Spectral evidence. So this could be anything. This could be, so in the case of Bridget Bishop, she was the first witch hanged of witchcraft in Salem. Her accusers, basically, there was 5 young women who said she looked at them and made them go into a fit. So anytime she would look at them in court, they would get on the floor and start acting like they're having an issue, or screaming and saying she's a witch, she's hurting me, just by looking at her. There was also cases that, so Bridget Bishop was actually married 3 times. Their first 2 husbands were old and they died, most likely of natural causes. The second husband, they actually accused her of witchcraft and killing him. However, they had no evidence. But when the husband died, the second husband died, the children got nothing. She got his land, the children got nothing. So the third time she was accused of witchcraft, just think, if there was 2 children and they got nothing from their family, they could have said, I saw her dancing with the devil. That's what they would say. There would be 2 people who said something, and then someone else would say something, and then someone else. So it became a bunch of hearsay and gossip in the town, is what it sounds like, and that's how they killed people and killed witches. So yeah, it was quite a tragedy of what happened. So that is why the site memorializes them. And I believe there are some, I know it's so crazy, but they're like retracting that they were witches. I mean, this is like the 1600s, and the people, they're already dead, but they're like retracting that they were actually witches. I mean, they probably weren't witches. Most of the time, witches were like healers. They were medicine women. They delivered the babies. And if a baby came out and the baby was stillborn, they would blame the woman who delivered the baby, or they would blame the woman for casting a spell on the baby. So it was a really crazy time in history, but it's very fascinating, very interesting, which is why Salem has become a hot spot these days. So where were they killed? They were killed at Proctor's Ledge, which I will show you, but it got dark. I think this part of the U.S. history is really interesting because it is basically where people from the original ships came. So I think Salem is so historical, and a lot of interesting things have happened here that you wouldn't, realize. And it also makes you realize that after traveling, I've traveled all around the world, you realize that the U.S. is a really young country, and it's a really young country, and it has a lot of issues. But the but if you think back to the original settlers, what they came and what they wanted, and they were escaping England, they were escaping the church, and they didn't want to be put under persecution. But yet when they came here, they put other people under persecution. So it was interesting how, as well as they did not adhere to the Bible, they did not adhere to the 10 Commandments, where they thought they thought they were holy, but yet thou shalt not kill seems to be a commandment that they forgot. And the Puritans also believed that it was their will to carry out God's will here on earth, and then the sinners, God would deal with them when they got to the afterlife. So I think it's really interesting that that religion basically, it killed so many people, and it continues to kill so many people. Thus, such strong belief in one thing, in not being open that there could be another way, or there could be more than one religion, and can we just all live in peace and harmony? And this is Proctor's Ledge. This is where they believe the witches were actually hanged. It was just discovered recently. It was dark by the time we got here because it gets dark so early, but this is another memorial for the witches that were hung. And thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you like the talk over his story version of this, and I will do more of them, and I will see you in the next video.